All right, welcome back to another edition of I almost said 12 Stooges. Well, we have multiple personalities, so that's apt. We are the three Stooges. We are three Sacramento-based area media mogul loudmouths. So we talk high school football. Certainly this time of year, heavy on the Sac-Joaquin section, where we touch all over the Bay Area and in California. Topical issues, what's going well, what's not going so well. We try to touch on all of those things, get us what people talk about. Joe Davidson, Sacramento Bee, Chris Jackson, West Coast Preps, Jordan Georgeson of Gold Country Media, the proud father of two little ones. His life has changed for the better. He looks a little sleep deprived, but the beard's still rocking, so that's good. We are going to have all kinds of topics, including game balls, where we give out a game ball in spirit to a player or two, and why. And it's not just for the ranked teams or the blue chip guys. We really dig into the unsung there, and we're going to talk about Jesuit going co-ed. In what universe is that? I'm going to talk about a Sacramento City Unified School District team that's emerged out of nowhere, the Rosemont Wolverines, and touch on them. Why Vacaville football in Solano County is such a highlight and must see event. And we're going to also pick some games and all that. First of all, this is a complaint that we hear all the time at any level of sports. You hear people complaining about the referees, the officials, the umpires, and they're out to get you. It's not true. But let's kick it off with Jordan. You were at a game the other night in Placer County. Who were the teams? What was the issue? What was going on? And how did you size it? And did the referees hose anybody?
So I was at Del Oro Granite Bay, and this was a game that, really had a lot riding on it because I think it was two teams that were they both are off to great starts, but it feels like they're both kind of looking for that signature win to kind of really kind of boost that playoff resume. I guess Granite Bay has a win over Jesuit, but, either way, a win over DO at the start, they had to go a long way. And for DO, beating a team like Granite Bay would go far. And there was definitely people I think on both sides had issues with the officiating, but I know that there were a lot of people on Del Oro's side that felt like they got hosed with what happened at the end of the game. And first off, kind of starting on the whole game, it's always a crowd is all or a group is always going to feel like they're getting hosed when the first play of the game, the starting quarterback gets sent back to the sideline because his knees are a little too exposed with his pants, which the refs have been cracking down on this year. What's tough about that is with modern football pants and the style being to be above the knees, it's pretty hard to get them below the knees sometimes. So I think that's kind of an apples to oranges type of thing. But nonetheless, that play doesn't really matter that much. I think Dio gained 4 or 5 yards on it. So, no harm, no foul. But what happened was one, these officials were kind of the type of crew that call everything. And in my opinion, as much as that's frustrating to watch, it doesn't mean they're hosing anyone. And sure, they might have missed a call or two, but it's high school football and NFL guys miss a call or two. Just last week in the Raider game, there was a penalty on the kickoff and they just forgot to assess the yardage. And instead of getting the ball on the 40, they got it at the 25. So, I mean, when NFL guys are making mistakes like that, I'm not going to harp on high school guys for maybe missing a hold or a block or something like that. But anyway, what the reason why Del Oro fans feel like they got hosed in this was at the end of the game, Del Oro was trailing 14-13. It's been a slugfest all game. Dio gets a stop with about, I think, 56 seconds left, is what I had written down, on its own 6 yard line. So they've got to go march probably 40, or they've got to march 50, 60 yards just to get into a position to maybe kick a field goal. Well, Del Oro does pretty much exactly that, but with no timeouts left, it's getting kind of close. And every time, every play, you either got to go out of bounds or be up on the line right away. And Del Oro gets down to last play. They get down for a first down completion onto the Granite Bay 44-yard line. And Grizzlies start celebrating because the clock's showing zeros. And all of a sudden, the referees go, no, 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 no. They get Granite Bay back on the sideline, go, there's zero point 0.1 seconds left on the clock. And Granite Bay's got one of those scoreboards where it doesn't just count the seconds, it does like the basketball style where you have tenths of a second. It's like there's 1/10 of a second left on the clock. Granite Bay is furious because they're like, what do you mean there's 1/10 of a second left? Well, Del Oro sees this and they're like, oh, Granite Bay is basically arguing about this. Run the field goal team out there. Now, this would have been a 60-yard attempt to win the game and or attempt to basically potentially win the game. Deloro's kicker earlier missed wide left by inches on a 41 yarder and had an extra point blocked. So anyway, Deloro marches the kickoff or the field goal team out there. Refs set the ball, and the rule is the clock had to stop to move the chains forward. The moment the chains are set, the referees go, okay, game's over. And the reason for that is because it would have been actually impossible to snap this ball in 1/10 of a second and get this kickoff. That being said, I don't think there was any time left on the clock when this tackle happened. So I understand Del Oro fans thinking they got hosed because they're like, why did you add the 10th on? And, give us that hope just to say, okay, game's over. But at the same time, I don't think there was enough time left to where I'm like, I feel like that situation was just made into more of a circus than it needed to be. And, would Del Oro have made a 60-yard kick to win this game? Probably not, but it would have been the story of the week if they did. Um, I understand the frustration of feeling like, hey, you know, maybe we could have gotten that kickoff, but at the same time, there were plenty of chances for Del Oro to win this game, and it didn't execute on those. So you can't blame the refs for that. And also, it's just one of those situations where I've seen a few times in high school football the 10th of a second thing being an issue where they're saying anything less than 1 second on the clock is actually a zero because there's no tenths of a second in high school football. So reality, them putting up 1/10 of a second shouldn't have mattered. And kind of the last thing on it too is let's say this was timed correctly and the official said, okay, the clock stops with 1 second left to move the chains and then it starts again. Del Oro wouldn't have had time to get its field goal team out there and get that kickoff if it was timed correctly. So I don't think necessarily there's anything wrong with how this ended. I think it got messier than it needed to because of the decision to stop and put that 1/10 off. But I mean, the reality is, I understand fans feeling like, maybe from their perspective and from the stands, feeling like they got hosed, but these refs weren't in it to hose them. Maybe there was a missed call or two, but there were some iffy calls against Granite Bay as well, and some missed calls there. So at the end of the day, both teams are getting away with some things. Both teams are maybe getting stuff called a little more tightly. I've really never seen a high school football game that I've genuinely watched going, these refs are out to get this one school or they don't like this one school. I've seen some maybe where I'm like, man, that's a bad blunder that this ref made, but I never think these refs made it maliciously because they don't like Rockland or they don't like Del Oro or Placer or Whitney or whoever it is. So, I mean, it's a tired trope, and the fans that say, well, it's an inexcusable mistake and all that, well, the pro guys make mistakes, and if you think you can do better, then there are plenty of avenues to get into officiating, and you know what? It's some nice little side cash, and you get to go to games for free. So if you think you can do better, feel free to sign up.
Before I throw you, Chris Jackson, that was well said. I agree. Food for thought really quick before you, Chris Jackson. We go to games and we hear at junior varsity games, at a freshman game and varsity games, the assistant coaches, not necessarily the varsity coaches, are already conditioning their players. These referees are going to get you. This whole us against the world, it's wasted energy. It's simply not true. I'll have more thoughts on it in a moment. But Chris, you tend to watch a lot of games on field level. You're right next to these referees. Some of them try to move you out of the way. Sometimes they're a little over officious. But I think we're probably all on the same page. Yes, these guys are human. They're not deliberately out there with clipboards saying, let's screw this team and let's hose that one.
Yeah, and I've seen good crews, I've seen bad crews. Like Joe, you were there with me at Casa Placer opening night, right? Like that crew struggled, right? They didn't I think it was a newish crew. They were on a bigger game. They struggled. That game went 3.5, 4 hours, but there wasn't any malicious intent, right? They just struggled, right? That was a newer crew. I don't know if they'd really work together, all that, but human. I saw some not great officiating for Sac Adventist girls basketball in the NorCal game last year. They didn't screw anybody, but it just wasn't a good day. It wasn't a great day of officiating, missed calls, this and that, but they're human, right? I would probably guarantee 95, 99% of these officials have no ill will, no ill intent towards you right now. Do they probably have favorite schools coaches in terms of like they'd rather be around on a Friday night, on a Tuesday night in basketball season, Wednesday afternoon baseball, whatever it is. Sure, of course. That's just the way it goes, right? Because they know maybe they'll be treated better. They just have better rapport. They've known some of these schools for longer, this and that. But I see bad calls every game. I've seen bad calls with my college team, right? There was that bad call with the Raiders thing. And being a Raiders fan, my first football memory is the tuck rule, right? So there's been a lot of really rough moments when it comes to officiating rules and all that stuff too, but it's not, I've never come out of a game, whether back when I played, just being a fan of thinking we lost because of that call, because of the refs. Now there's 48 minutes of football at the high school level, 60 minutes in college and the pros. It's a tough job. Being an official is a tough job. Everything's going so fast, and there's only so much training you get at the high school level too. There's not a ton of refs either. It was refreshing to be at Sarah St. Ignatius on Saturday afternoon, a big W Cal game, and Sarah's PA announcer gives a shout out to the refs and tells more people to get involved and to treat them right, treat them with respect. Right? Coaches are going to make bad calls some days. That's just, they're going to make play calls that they regret. They're going to make decisions with lineups, whatever it is that they regret. I make mistakes every day in my job. That's just, we all do, right? We're human. That's part of the job. That's part of life. But that doesn't mean that because I made a mistake that I'm out to get somebody. Because a referee makes a mistake, it doesn't mean that they're out to screw your kid and ruin their chances at a championship or getting a scholarship. Just because a coach makes a bad call doesn't mean that he's out to lose the game and all of that stuff too. There's just a lot of wasted energy and a lot of facets in life, and this is one of them. Focus on what you can control, and what you can control is yourself, your effort, and how you execute. That's all that you can control, and that's all that you should be focused on and worried about. If you do that, the rest will come.
No, that's well said for both of you guys. Um, and I always use that same terminology, Chris Jackson, wasted energy. It's a tired act. I was at the Folsom Oak Ridge game. The Oak Ridge fans were on social media, some of their players, and they thought the spot of the ball was wrong. They thought this was wrong. And they were convinced that the referees hosed them over. The Folsom fans, I'm on that side in the press box all game long. Oh, the referees are screwing us. And so no matter what level of play, whether it's high school, college, pro, youth sports, both sides think they're getting screwed. And it's just a tired act, and we're so used to seeing it on TV and just this overly competitive environment. And Chris Jackson and Jordan, you both touched on it. There's a shortage of referees. And here's a thinking I have, and I think we're all on the same page. Get out there and officiate. You'll find out how hard it is. And yeah, sometimes these guys get overwhelmed. Sometimes Chris Jackson and I did the Placer Casserole game. Started at 8 o'clock, got over last snap of the game, 11:30. Young, inexperienced crew shouldn't have been doing that game. And my longtime running mate photographer, Jose Luis Villegas of the Sacramento Bee, and we were talking to one of the referees, the side judge, before the game, and say, "Hey, let's have a good, clean game." And he snapped, "You get out here and do this." And I said, "Hey, man, that's we're just rolling with it here." And so these things get a little hot and contested, and but nobody's out to hose anybody. But just to hear both sides, there are times I've been at Folsom games, and the fans think, "Oh, the referees are out to get us, the CIF's out to get us." You're up 40-0. What about the team on the other side of the stadium? You don't think those fans don't feel like they're really getting it? So really interesting. All right, because I have this kind of data. This is a fun note for both of you guys. The likelihood of the Delaware kid making a 60-yard field goal was extremely small because in the history of the Sac-Joaquin section, we've only had two kids ever make 58-yard field goals, and those are section records. Zach McSweeney, Nevada Union, 1994. I was there. I saw that game. It was against Casserole, 58 yards. I can't remember who won. It's not important. It was a long field goal. I think Nevada Union won. And then in 2014, Alex Godinez of Natomas in a win over Lyndhurst, a 58-yarder. So it is extremely rare. And I think there was a player for Del Oro of all schools, Jeff Walters, his first year, second year as coach, had a 56-yard field goal to beat Lincoln in a playoff game. And so that's probably 2018-ish or so. And so it's rare. but I thought we kind of size that up, and we're going to call out referees when it's warranted, and we're going to celebrate referees. These guys, thankless job. They just get unloaded on. I've seen referees get chased out of stadiums. There they are in their uniform, just being chased into the parking lot. That always seems a bit much, but goodness sakes. All right, so we had an interesting bit of news over the weekend, not sports related, but it will become sports related. The Jesuit Marauders school that was founded in Carmichael in 1963, always an all boys school, will become co-ed in a couple of years. Yikes. I didn't see that coming. I know they've talked about that. I got a closing thought on that. But Jordan, what do you think of that? I mean, you may have some Sierra Foothill League games now that will have the Jesuit girls in a SFL championship showdown with Del Oro at some point. So it seems a little different, but what are your thoughts on this?
It's an interesting thing, especially because the more I read about it, the more it sounds like it's not going to be, I know Jesuit and St. Francis have always had this relationship. It's not going to be bringing St. Francis over to Jesuit's campus. Sounds like St. Francis is going to be its own entity, and Jesuit's going to add girls too. So what that means for the SFL is interesting because now you're essentially adding a whole nother school in a way. What that means in terms of enrollment's interesting because Jesuit's going to have to either expand that campus or be a lot more selective about who they let in. And then, maybe their athletics look a little different when you're 50-50 boys and girls, right? Or even if you're, let's say 65 boys, 35% girls, it's still going to look a little bit different athletically in terms of the pool you have to choose from. I really didn't see this coming. When I first saw it, I really kind of had questions about how legit it was because it just seemed like one of those things that was unbelievable. And it's looking like it's happening. I'm really interested to see what this is going to mean for some of these athletics. Does Jesuit stick around in the SFL? Because I think a big part of why they're in it is, yeah, the enrollment I think is what, like 1,600, 1,700. But the thing is, it's
Thousand, just
1,700.
1,000 for Jesuit.
But the thing with that too, though, is 1,000 boys to pull from. So you're essentially getting the athletic pool of, let's say, a 2,000 person school because we're thinking 50-50. So now, what does that look like? Does Jesuit drop to Division two or three with this? It's There's going to be a lot at play here. I'm really interested to see what happens, and I think the most interesting thing and kind of what gets lost in the shuffle is what becomes of St. Francis with this and what's their response in a way. Do they stay all girls? Do they open up their doors too and the two schools kind of go their separate way, or how's that all going to look down the road? So yeah, it's a bombshell. I think none of us really expected this and we've heard the rumors but never thought it would actually happen.
Yeah, Chris, any thoughts on this? And really quick, St. Francis has been around for years, a powerhouse girls athletic program, has partnered up and to a degree with Jesuit when they go to sporting events and support and cheer, like at the Holy Bowl, but no interest in joining ranks with Jesuit. And I'm wondering if a lot of this is tuition based, great way to make more money. But Chris, what are your thoughts? And maybe you could wheel in some of the West Catholic Athletic League programs in the Bay Area. Some of those are co-ed.
Yep. Yeah, so there are quite a few co-ed schools in the West Catholic Athletic League. Reardon, St. Ignatius, Sacred Heart Cathedral, Bellarmine's an all-boys school, Sarah's an all-boys school. But then if you go to the Bay Area, or if you go to other parts of the Bay Area, like De La Salle, the East Bay Athletic League, they're the all-boys school. Right across the street is Carondelet, the all-girls school. So they still have got that really tight relationship, right? They're essentially one, but they're not. Jesuit, this is different, right? They had have that relationship still with St. Francis, but now you're going to a co-ed model. But what they're saying at Jesuit is that boys and girls will still have separate classes, but they're making this shift, enrollment trends, other factors, all of that stuff. Now they're going to increase enrollment. How that increases remains to be seen. We don't know. We can see projections, but projections aren't always valid, right? Either you don't hit those projections or you far exceed them. It depends on how many kids apply, how many kids want to be a part of it. I mean, there's just a lot to look at, right? And what made this difficult for Jesuit and St. Francis having that co-ed relationship like De La Salle and Carondelet is they're just not right across the street, right? Jesuits, Carmichael, Sacramento border. St. Francis and Sacramento. That they're not right next to each other. It's a little bit different. It's hard to kind of make that relationship work like that. And St. Francis, I'm interested to see if they ever become a co-ed school too in response to this, right? There are a lot of parents out there that like to send their kids to private schools. If there are more options, maybe that creates more parents, more families wanting to send their kids to a different private school. Maybe Jesuit doesn't fit something for their son, but let's say what St. Francis does fits their son. If St. Francis becomes a co-ed school, right? That's all hypotheticals. I'm just very interested to see how this becomes. Jesuits got a really good athletics culture. They've got great coaches and athletic director and Hank who really cares, who's worked at the Division 1 level in college athletics too. It's hard for me to see Jesuit taking a dip in sports, just what they've done for years. If they want to increase enrollment anyway with bringing on more girls, I don't know if this will really affect their athletics, at least in the short term. They've got a rich basketball history, a rich baseball history. Football's excellent. They're starting to really compete in the SFL in year two. It's a wait and see mode for a lot of these things. But Jesuit has this plan. I was shocked, like Jordan was too, whenever you texted us, Jordan, Saturday night, Sunday morning, whatever it was, and saying, "Wait, is this true?" And come to find out, it's true. And Joe, you had found out when you were in at Cal Poly from a Jesuit alum, I think there too. But Jesuit wants to become a bigger school, and more power to them. That's
Yeah,
what they
no,
want to
it's
do, and
well
that's
said.
their
And
plan. And maybe they get great girls sports out of it too. Maybe St. Francis still has great girls sports, but maybe Jesuit is able to pull more girls from some of these other public schools of kids that were going to go to Oak Ridge, Delaware, Folsom, wherever it was, and then Jesuit's girls sports kind of go on that rise too.
I think you mentioned Hank Weinberger, the terrific athletic director, very involved. I think when this does happen in the fall of 2027, I think it is, they'll make it work. And always been excellent coaches, and they'll find a way. And I'll be really curious to see. And kind of a historical note, there was Loretto High School for decades in Sacramento. It was an all-girls school, and it closed several years ago, declining enrollment. I think a lot of St. Francis, a lot of those girls got absorbed into St. Francis, and so it'll be interesting to see what happens. And I don't think St. Francis is going to do anything but stay an all-girls school. It's the way it's been for as long as the school's been around. Really rose to power in athletics in the 1980s and has done it ever since. Cross country and the Olympic sports and basketball's had state championship programs and section championship programs. We haven't seen it in the last few years, but it's been there with all the ability to return. And it was Jake Hall who you referenced there, Chris Jackson. He was a former Jesuit football star. He went to Cal Poly. Cal Poly graduate. He works with in the football program. Got to know him over the years, and he came hustling over to me before kickoff and said he had his cell phone and it was like an email to alums or something confirming it. What are your thoughts? And he was like, wow, he had to take a moment to process this. This is just different. I remember Ron Lineberger was a throwback, crusty old baseball coach in the 60s, 70s, and 80s at Christian Brothers and a longtime athletic director there, one of the great old spirits. And in the 90s, mid to late 90s, that's when there was a move to get Christian Brothers, which opened in the 1880s in Sacramento, to become a co-ed school. And he was livid. And I remember quoting him in the Sacramento Bee because this isn't a good idea. What are we doing? Blah, blah, blah. Years later, 15 years later. So he ran into me at a game, basketball game, and he had a couple granddaughters playing sports at Christian Brothers. He says, boy, was I wrong. We had to be more open-minded and all that. I think we're more open-minded now across the board. But that was so funny. He was vehemently against it, and then he saw the joy of his own granddaughters and her teammates, girls that all grew up together, and said, "Wow, did I miss that one?" What was the thinking? Oh, it's going to be a distraction. Well, distractions are part of life, so we'll see what happens with that. But I'm going to segue here. We mentioned Cal Poly. It came down to cover UC Davis football at Cal Poly. Cal Poly is much improved. Paul Wolf is the coach for Cal Poly. He's a Yolo County native, just a terrific class guy. And UC Davis came down and won the game 34-27. Caden Pennick was terrific. He's the Big Sky Conference Player of the Week again. He had 3 touchdown passes, ran for one. He looked marvelous. He had good footwork. None of this is a surprise to either one of us. Jordan, we saw his act in Placer County with what he did at Del Oro. He's a redshirt freshman, and he's going to be, if he sticks around, which I think he will, he's going to be a 4-year starter. He's already been so impressive, and he has the attention of his teammates, and the coaches challenge him and push him hard to be excellent. And Tim Plow, the Aggies coach, said that was an all-time Aggie quarterback moment the other night. And so kudos to Caden Pennick. But Jordan, we're not surprised.
No, not at all. I mean, this is a kid that I remember the first time I watched this kid play was I was going to cover a Del Oro game, and I was watching the JV football game, and I was like, man, that quarterback can really play. And I start talking to a few people, and then I find out that his freshman year of high school, he beat out Austin Mack for the starting quarterback position at Del Oro. Austin Mack, who ended up being a star at Folsom and is now playing at Alabama. So it goes to show the talent that he had to beat him out right there, and then ends up taking over that starting quarterback position after platooning for the first couple games with a great game against Clayton Valley. And it was just, I mean, what he did at times just felt like magic with the football. And there were times where it looked like there's plays he made where it feels like only I've seen Patrick Mahomes make these plays, and Ryder Lyons maybe a couple times too. And I mean, again, if you want to know how good he is, didn't he? I believe he beat out Ryder Lyons for SFL Offensive Player of the Year during Ryder's sophomore year. I think that would have been Caden's senior year. Not shocked at all that he earned that starting job at UC Davis as a redshirt freshman. I think there was a world that he could have earned that starting job as a true freshman, or earned some playing time as a true freshman. And I think he did get a couple snaps in the game, but seeing what he's done so far is just, it feels like par for the course. 11 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, over 1,000 yards already. Davis is looking like a force in the FCS. And I think the big thing with Caden is we all kind of knew the talent he had. I still stand on my thought that I think if he was a couple inches taller, he would have been a lot higher recruited and higher rated of a prospect, and probably would be playing, big time Power Five football somewhere. But at 6 feet tall, sometimes you got to prove yourself a little bit. And I think he's doing exactly that at Davis right now. A fun kid to watch, and it's nice to see him really land on his feet there and pick up right where he left off.
Now, he's really good, and I have a perfect segue to you, Chris Jackson. And so UC Davis has had local quarterbacks, Sacramento area extended for decades. That included Chris Peterson, who went on to become a great college football coach at Boise State and the Washington Huskies. Kahari Jones out of Center High School. Peterson's out of Yuba City, played in the 90s and played in the Canadian Football League for years. JT O'Sullivan has all kinds of career passing marks and records. Out of Jesuit High School, played some 12, 13 years in the NFL, mostly as a backup, just on and on and on. And there was also, Bob Biggs was one of the early ones in the early 70s for UC Davis, played for Jim Soker, and he's out of Vacaville High School. And Vacaville High School back then was a big deal in Solano County. Chris Jackson, you were just in Solano County and you saw Vacaville. Tell us about the game, but really, the game is certainly the biggest part, but the final score certainly, but the just the environment and the atmosphere with what they do. So take us into that environment, and it hasn't slowed down at all over the decades.
I always forget how beautiful that stadium is and that setting is, right? When you enter from the stadium, I don't know what would be the south side of the stadium, I guess. I don't know. I'm not great directionally with that stuff. I didn't go to college to major in directionality or whatever the heck they call that, right? You see the hills, you see those beautiful homes back there. The stadium is beautiful, great bleachers. This place was packed. I got there. Game started at 7:30. I rolled in at like 5 o'clock, and I had to park well away from the stadium, which I don't mind at all. That's fine. That means it's a great game. Everybody wants to be there. And it felt like a championship bout, right? Before the year, you kind of expected Vanden and Vacaville would be those teams sparring for that Monticello Umpire League title, and there was Vacaville doing it again. Defense rose to the occasion. Vacaville turned it over 4 times, but its defense did not allow a single score because Vanden's lone score came on its first possession on a pick six from monster sophomore D lineman Jaden Dickens. After that, I mean, Vacaville hunkered down. And to overcome 4 turnovers from your offense. We asked Coach Papadopoulos after the game, if we told you before this that you would turn the ball over 4 times and win, what would you say? And he's like, yeah, no way. That'd be absolutely insane. But Vacaville did that. They've got this just swarming defense. Jake Williams, 14 tackles. They've got a 6'3" edge rusher outside backer, Brody Rogers, who felt like every single play was just on top of the football, just here, there, everywhere. I haven't seen sideline to sideline like that from a whole bunch of kids. I mean, the kid's incredible. They've got just a strong running game. Roman Connor Owens had their lone score there late in the third quarter. Runs between the tackles, had over 100 yards again. But that's Vacaville football, right? They're going to out tough you, out muscle you, out physical you, and that's how they won a big game over the defending state champs, and that's why Vacaville's won 5 straight. To think of, they allowed 65 points week 1 to Atwater. It was a very good team. Atwater's got that team this year. It looks like that can make a run. But to go from that to then the following 6 games, Vacaville's allowed a total of 72 points. Just 6 against Vanden, and all 6 were because of a Vanden defensive score and then extra point. I think it was blocked, I want to say. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but Vacaville's the class of the MEL, and they're, I would say, on their way to a 7th league title in the last 9 years. So Solano County runs through Vacaville High School. Vanden's got 2 state titles since 2021, and Vacaville looks like is going to be hanging its own banner and another league banner there in that gym, that stadium, and keep it going. But well-coached program, disciplined, great fan base, great community, and it's another great group of athletes that a defense that had every reason to fold after giving 65 points week 1 in an overtime loss. I think they were up 21 in that game too. They had a player-led meeting after that week 2 loss to West Park, and ever since then it's been Vacaville football that's finest. So it probably looked like the Vacaville teams you've had the pleasure of covering for years here, and teams I've had the pleasure of covering for the last few years, but nothing like those Bulldogs out there in Solano County.
That's right. And it starts with great coaching. Mike Papadopoulos, one of the class good guys. We always talk about this on the Three Stooges podcast, but sportsmanship's always a big deal. We're big on that. And we could always tell the measure of a coach's class when he speaks after a defeat. And Mike Papadopoulos will do that. Paul Doherty of Folsom will do that. Josh Perry of Del Oro will do that. There are a lot of coaches who won't do that. Joe Catalico of Granite Bay will speak after a loss. Sometimes they just get grumpy and mad and leave me alone. And Mike Papadopoulos is always inspired by his late great father-in-law, Coach Z, Tom Zanino, a 200-game winner at Vacaville, and died several years ago, but was able to watch his son lead championship teams from the sideline. So it was a proud pop there. Um, Really cool, really cool. One last note on Caden Pinnock. He is inspired by his cousin, Stone Smart, who 10 years ago this fall led Del Oro football to a state championship and nearly a repeat in 2016. Stone Smart played quarterback and then is now a tight end in the NFL. They're in regular contact, Stone and his cousin, Caden Pinnock. It's all about effort and just chase after it and those kind of things. Why don't we transition into some game balls? And we're going to name one guy, highlight him, go all the way around the table, and then we'll go back one more time around, and then we're going to pick a game, 2 games each, and with a score and some insight there. But Jordan, kick us off. Who's a game ball worthy guy?
I mean, I've got to give it to the do-it-all running back at Granite Bay, Isaiah Eni. 30 carries, 204 yards, a touchdown. He had 161 yards in the first half. He also had an interception that kept Del Oro out of the end zone late in the second quarter. Final seconds. It really, I mean, that's another one of those plays that was a difference in that game when you win by 1 because they were in field goal range. And it's just one of those. I mean, it's been a long time since I've seen a guy who can take over a game and be a game breaker like him. And what's scary is he's been doing it since his freshman year of high school. Great kid, fun to watch play. I mean, he runs the ball angry too, and he is a hard guy to bring down. I mean, it feels like every single tackle, Del Oro was able to get him behind the line. I think they had like 10 tackles for loss in that game. So they were able to stuff him a fair amount, but it still took 3 or 4 guys to bring him down even behind the line because he just runs that hard. And it feels like every time he's moving the ball, it turns into like a rugby scrum in a way. And if you want to know how good of a runner he is, He got the badge of honor from Josh Perry, the Del Oro head coach. I asked him after the game what makes him so tough to stop, and he goes, he has strong legs, he has a good pad level, and he just runs the ball the way that he should run it. And that's a former NFL fullback that's saying that about him. So I think that's a pretty good nod and a vote of confidence to get from the opposing coach. So Isaiah, you get my first game ball.
Chris Jackson, continue. That's great insight and good point about Josh Perry, because I'm sure you were watching that game, Jordan, and thought that's a Josh Perry type of guy, and he's going to respect him because they can't stop him. And he had an 80-yard touchdown, 85-yard burst, so he's got some wheels. He is going to Sacramento State. He's got a big family, and they're all going to go and watch. And pleasant young man. They call him the Pied Piper on campus, meaning people follow him. They gravitate him to him, not because he's a football player, but because he's all about goodness. Chris Jackson, game ball.
Another one, West Burford of Oakdale. I had the double take, triple take, quadruple take. 71-55 win over East Union. West Burford, 423 rushing yards and 7 touchdowns in that win. That's all this kid does. He just makes plays. Last year, let's look at his stats from last year. 2,678 rushing yards and 32 touchdowns, 92 tackles. This year, he's in 6 games, 1,428 rushing yards and 17 touchdowns, and he's got 17 tackles for loss on defense. He's an Air Force commit. Can't wait to watch him playing Mountain West football. Also a great wrestler, great at every sport he does, a multi-sport guy, great academically. West Burford, you can see, is another one of those kids that people gravitate towards too at Oakdale. If you haven't seen a game at the Corral, you should go see West Burford before it's too late at the high school level, because 423 rushing yards and 7 touchdowns in one game. I'm lost for words at this point.
That's one thing that we, as we toot our horn, which we're allowed to do, at least I will, we aren't just going to drop names and stats, but we're going to tell you a little bit about these guys. And relentless in high school football, you could run the ball. That's great. I don't have the section rushing single game record, but that's a top five. We've had kids over the years who nobody's gone for more than 500. That would be insane. But that is something. And no doubt about the corral down there. Great, great environment. All right, I'm going to go with two guys who did not play and will not play a game the rest of this season. And I saw they were both tied to Folsom Oak Ridge game. Isaac Pierce, the two-way junior star receiver, defensive back, took an unusual cleat to the pancreas the previous week at home against Granite Bay. And if you talk to people who've been around football for a long time, they said that is like a 1 in a million shot. So there's this pile up of bodies, and somehow a cleat wound up on his chest. Nothing malicious, of course, and hits him. I was at that game. There was no stoppage of play. Didn't even see it. And he played a couple more downs. He didn't go down, but he got hospitalized, some surgery. And he was watching the ABC Jam um, game with Matthew Bissett calling it on the streaming NFHS network. And, he's agonizing. And then Folsom's running back, Joseph Ironman, was on crutches, blown knee. He just went down a couple of weeks earlier, and he's only a junior. They were both juniors. These kids, this means everything to them to be able to play high school football, to have good teammates and those kind of things. And so they're hurting. Their teams are thinking about them in spirit. So we are allowed to give game balls to guys that didn't play because they would have played and they would have made a difference in that game. Jordan, one more time around with you, another game ball.
All right. Sorry for my defensive lovers, because this is going to be another offensive game ball. Connor Frontiera of 12 Bridges and their 56-17 win over Nevada Union. First off, Nevada Union was winning 17-13 at the end of the first quarter in this game. Then 12 Bridges just turned it on. But hey, you know what? Minor magic is good, but sometimes it takes a stampede of rhinos to take it out. Frontiera, though, 12 of 20, 331 yards, 5 touchdowns. He had an average completion of 27.6 yards. And then get this, as a team, 12 Bridges completed 16 passes. So backup Jordan Lush was 4-4 passing, 16 different passes to 10 different receivers. for 361 passing yards. 5 different players hauled in a touchdown, but a shout out to Connor Frontera. I mean, he's just been unbelievable this season for the Rhinos, and his stats are pulling up right now. But I mean, 15 touchdowns, 1 interception, 5 yards away from 1,500 yards, averaging 17 yards of completion this year. I mean, 140 quarterback rating, 87 of 131 passing. You can't really ask for much more of him. And what's scary about it is we've talked about this a lot. Connor Frontier is another kid that waited his turn at this program. He was on the bench, really only got in running clock situations last year and got to perfect his handoff skills, but that was about it. And coming in, taking over the reins the way that they have, and we already know how dangerous 12 Bridge's rushing attack is, but now that Frontera is starting to really find his stride and they're getting healthy again, that is a very scary team because we've talked about this before, but they haven't played a complete 4 quarters yet, and they're 6-0. So you can spin that 2 ways, saying, hey, you can't start slow like that against some teams, but also you haven't played a complete game yet, and you're still 6-0. And Connor Frontier is a big part of that, so you get my game ball.
Outstanding, outstanding. Chris Jackson, keep it rolling.
I do love that quarterback lineage at 12 Bridges first off. It's from Whit Cruz to Connor Flaherty to Connor Frontera. It's just 3 guys that have won big, right? They've got how many combined regular season losses between all of them, and that was when there was not a senior class yet at that school in 2022, which says a ton to you. But anyway, I may have given him one last week. I don't remember, but I'll do it again. Keon Cato of Mira Loma, the freshman. 4 touchdowns in their latest win when they put up 78 points to beat San Juan. 8-man football is thriving at Mira Loma. They're undefeated. They're 5-0. Jesse Collins has this program back and rolling at that level. Keon Cato, he's got 12 touchdowns this year. He's a top receiver, a top returner. Had a couple of those touchdowns in the return game, but he looks like somebody that we may just see playing on Saturdays in a few years at the college level. That's how good this kid is. That's how quick and athletic and just dynamic he is. And game ball to this freshman. I saw quite a few freshmen this weekend across the area, from the Sarah SI game of 2 quarterbacks being freshmen started at the varsity level there to Keon Cato and what he's doing at Mira Loma. So he gets a game ball and probably his second of, I would say, many more this year and many more of his career.
That's amazing. A freshman, I don't care what school, if it's 8-man, 11-man, illegal 12th man in the field, whatever. To be a freshman on varsity football is quite an accomplishment. And let's hope he stays. Too many times, and this will be a podcast topic at some point where too many times we see these great blue chip type of kids or potential blue chippers, and then they bounce around school. So stay put. But great job by Jesse Collins and Mira Loma. Was a powerhouse program in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Still an academic school, but the football fortunes have taken a dip. All right, I've got a refreshing one out of Yolo County. Sophomore Cohen Dwyer of Woodland High School. The Wolves, 9 catches, 258 yards, 2 touchdowns, 26-21 win over Natomas. The first victory of the season for the Woodland Wolves. So that's a double bonus game ball there. It's a program it's had some success. Some 30 years ago, they were Division One, playing Grant in section semifinals. And then now you look at them and they're much smaller enrollment. Pioneer High School opened a few years ago. And then there's Woodland Christian, and there's just the city's not big enough to have 3 powerhouse programs. Pioneer's really good. Woodland Christian's been a state championship program, and the one team that's just kind of taking a beating is Woodland, but they're grinding it out. And so kudos to Cohen Dwyer with that big game. All right, do we have one more game ball for us all the way around, or should we do a game of the week projection?
I can do one more game ball. Danny Sanchez Harlow at Placer. He had one of the more efficient homecomings you're ever going to have as a senior. 7 carries, 143 yards, 3 touchdowns on the ground, and had I think it was a 57-yard receiving touchdown on his lone reception. So about as good as your night can be when you have 8 touches, go for over 200 yards and have 4 touchdowns. So I'll give a shout out to him. Danny Sanchez Harlow leading the Hillmen to a homecoming win, 42-26 over Del Campo. And the best part of homecoming, I talked to Joey Montoya. He said everyone got to play. Those last 2 touchdowns for Del Campo came at the end when he's mixing everyone in because everyone deserves to see the field on homecoming. So shout out to Danny Sanchez Harlow for that one. Placer 4-2 kind of feels like they're finding their stride and they've got a big one this week, but I'll preview that in a little bit.
Chris Jackson, throw one more out there.
Let's go to Manteca. Let's keep it in the Valley Oak League, undefeated. We mentioned their running back Nico Juarez last week. This week, their senior athlete Quinn Martinez, 74-7 win over Sierra, 5 total touchdowns, 2 receiving touchdowns, 2 punt return touchdowns, and a kick return touchdown. This kid is super fast. I saw some of his verified data down there too. One guy that puts on some of those GPS trackers on down there, he's hit 23 miles per hour before. I think it was on the track, but still he's hit 21 miles an hour on the football field. This kid is dynamic, electric, quite frankly, incredible. Manteca undefeated. They've got that team that looks like they're going to be playing at Hughes Stadium. And Quinn Martinez, big reason why.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm going to go with Rio Americano, Ryder Trantham. We hear of Ryder, we think of Ryder Lyons. Well, this Ryder Trantham has been a really good player. He's come back from injuries, hit a touchdown pass, 2 rushing touchdowns, and a 35-28 victory over the Bella Vista Broncos. Just the fact that he's come back from injuries is remarkable. So we applaud him. He had a teammate, Devin Point, who had an 80-yard kickoff return for a touchdown. He had a diving touchdown at the end of the half. So good things going on with the Rio Americano Raiders. All right, let's do a game each. We're going to pick one game each, size it up with a score. Jordan, you just teased on it. You had a big one up in Placer County.
Yeah, Placer 12 Bridges. This one is one of kind of there's a 3 team or 3 horse race for the FVL title, I think, between 12 Bridges, Placer, and Roseville. And 12 Bridges is a team to beat with this one. These two played twice last year. First game was just electric. I think it was like a 52-38 final score, and it was one of those that still kind of felt like, even though it was a 2 touchdown cushion all game, just it felt like an arena football game, and you just knew someone was going to score, and every time someone potentially got a stop, you just felt like it was going to be huge because there weren't going to be many of them. And then the playoff game, that reigning sideways semifinal, and Lincoln, where 12 Bridges kind of pulled away in the second half. So Rhinos got both wins in this one. The Hillmen definitely haven't forgotten it. Chris Bean and Joey Montoya, two of the all-time great coaches in this area, great offensive minds, and just great guys too to catch up with. Two of my favorite coaches to see when I'm covering them in person. I think scoreboard operator is going to be getting overtime pay with these two, because these offenses look scary once again. And yeah, I think I'm going to go with the Rhinos in this one just because they've found ways to win no matter what. And it hasn't always been pretty, but they've been doing it. And the mark of a good team sometimes is finding ways to win when it's ugly. And I don't think this one's going to be ugly. I think it's going to be maybe ugly for defensive fans, but I think it's going to be 12 Bridges, let's say 38-31.
Excellent. Chris Jackson, size us up.
I'm going to do a non-league game, which is weird to say this time of year, but let's go to Rockland Monterey Trail, right? There are some changes to the SFL schedule this year. Davis going independent, but Rockland against Monterey Trail this Friday. How does Rockland kind of respond there, right? Rockland 4-2. They had a couple of those tough losses to Folsom, Jesuit. They did kind of roll past Whitney this past weekend. A good kind of momentum boost, confidence boost going into this. And Monterey Trail, led by TJ Ewing, always really figuring good on the ground. They've got a senior running back, Odie Jefferson, who's terrific, but 2 other young guys, Xander McGee, Nigel Flower, sophomore and freshman. How does Rockland stop them? And how does Monterey Trail stop Reeve Sloan? Then Nevada commit the 3-star quarterback at Rockland, a third-year varsity starter. I picked Monterey Trail in our predictions, but I could really see Rockland winning this game. Maybe I want to change this. Something about Rockland, I think that I still really like that Jesuit loss was tough, yes. But you know what? Let's change it. I put in print Monterey Trail. You know what? Let's go Rockland. I'm changing it right now. Rockland wins a crazy game. I don't know, 28-27.
I like it. And you know what? That's how competitive these games are. One day we're going with this and subject to change. Maybe it's going to go with that. And a little history flashback here with Monterey Trail. The school opened in Elk Grove Unified in 2004. TJ Ewing was the founding coach, and the Sac-Joaquin Section took Monterey Trail oddly and put him in the Sierra Foothill League with all of those bruisers that were all, Folsom wasn't in the league then, but all the others were. Oak Ridge, Granite Bay, Del Oro, and all. Wow. And so Monterey Trail went 1-19 in its first two seasons, but got better, learned. TJ said it was the best thing to happen. But so you talk about getting your face mask kicked in. They've responded. And how cool that these two coaches, Jason Adams and Rockland, TJ Ewing, found a way to get this game in when they had an odd bye that late in the schedule. So that is terrific. All right, I'm going to do a game, an eight-man game in the Oak Grove Unified School District. The Valley Vikings playing the Florin Panthers. And why am I picking this? We're going to have a reporter go out there. Why are we doing that? Because a year ago, neither one of these teams had a football team. They folded them before kickoff. They had low varsity numbers on their roster. They just didn't have enough. It was a safety issue, painful decision to pull the plug. How can two schools with 1,600 people on campus not have more football players? It happens. And when you're not winning, people don't come out. It's a hard sport. It's demanding. It's hot weather. Coaches are barking at you. And so they're back. They're both in eight-man football. Brian Lewis is the coach for Valley. Tim Cobley is the coach for Florin. They're ecstatic that their kids have a chance to play football. Some of these kids are still learning how to play football. And they didn't play a lot of youth football or at the lower levels. So this is an example, and we've touched on this a lot, where eight-man helps save these programs. So I'm going to go Valley in a high-scoring game. Could you imagine we've picked a flag game? 8-0. No, that's not likely. So we'll go 42-21 Valley Vikings. So there we go. Guys, we can do this all day long. We're going to sign off on this. We'll be back next week. I think what we'll do, unless something else comes up, maybe we'll talk on the Folsom Bulldogs. Can anybody close the gap, and why it can and will happen? So we'll touch on that next week. But for Joe Davidson, Chris Jackson, Jordan Georgeson, we love talking to you guys. We love talking to each other. We'll probably be on off as soon as we hang up here. We'll still be talking for 20 minutes. But anyways, everybody, we'll see you soon.